Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tapo me hridayang brahmans. Tapo me hridayang brahmans. Tanur vidya kriya kriti. Tanur vidya kriya kritihi. Angani kratavo jata. Angani kratavo jata. Dharma atma savaha suraha. Dharma atma savasuraha. Tapo me hridayam brahmans. Tanur vidya kriya kritihi. Angani kartavyo jata. Dharma atma savasuraha. Tapo me hridayang brahmans. Tanur vidya kriya kritihi. Angani kratavo jata. Dharma atma savasuraha. Tapo me hridayam brahmans. Tanur vidya kriya kriti. Angani kratavo jata. Dharma atma savasuraha. Tapo me hridayam brahmans. Tajur vidya kriya kriti. Tapo me hridayam brahmans. Tanur vidya kriya kriti. Angani kratavo jata. Dharma atma savasvaraha. Ladies. Tapo me hridayam brahmans. Tanur vidya kriya kriti. Angani kratavo jata. Dharma atma savasvaraha. Tapo me hridayam brahmans. Dhanur vidya kriya kriti. Angani tapaha. Austerities like mental control, mystic yoga and meditation. Me, my. Hridayam, heart. Brahman, O Brahmana. Tanuhu, the body. Vidya, the knowledge derived from Vedic scripture. Kriya, spiritual activities. Akritihi, form. Angani, the limbs of the body. Kratavaha, the ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices mentioned in the Vedic literature. Jataha, completed. Adharmaha, the religious principles for executing the ritualistic ceremonies. Atma, my soul. Asvaha, life heirs. Suraha, the demigods who execute my orders in different departments of the material world. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. My dear Brahmana, austerity in the form of meditation is my heart. Vedic knowledge in the form of hymns and mantras constitute my body, and spiritual activities and ecstatic emotions are my actual form. The ritualistic ceremonies and sacrifices, when properly conducted, are the various limbs of my body. The unseen good fortune proceeding from pious or spiritual activities constitute my mind, and the demigods who execute my orders in the various departments are my life and soul. Sometimes atheists argue that since God is invisible to their eyes, they do not believe in God. For them, the Supreme Lord is describing a method by which one can see God in His impersonal form. Intelligent persons can see God in His personal form, as stated in the Shastras. But if one is very eager to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead immediately face to face, he can see the Supreme Lord through this description, which portrays the various internal and external parts of his body. To engage in tapasya, or denial of material activities, is the first principle of spiritual life. Then there are spiritual activities, such as performance of Vedic ritualistic sacrifices, study of the Vedic knowledge, meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. One should always respect the demigods and understand how they are situated, how they act, and how they manage the activities of the various departments of this material world. In this way, one can see how God is existing and how everything is managed perfectly because of the presence of the Supreme Lord. As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text number 10, Mayad yakshena prakriti suyate sacharachanam hetunanena konteya jagad viparivartate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. If one is unable to see the Supreme Lord, although He is present as Krishna in His various incarnations, one may see the Supreme Lord's impersonal feature according to the direction of the Vedas by seeing the activities of material nature. Everything done under the direction of the Vedic injunctions is called dharma, as described by the order carriers of Yamaraj, Bhagavatam 6th canto, 1st chapter, text 40. Veda pranhito dharmo yadharmas tad viparyaha vedo narayana sakshat swayambur iti sushruruma. That which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma, the religious principles, and the opposite of that is irreligion. The Vedas are directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan and are self-born. This we have heard from Yamaraj. In this connection, Srila Madhva Acharya comments, Tapo Bhimani Rudrastu Vishnu Hridayam Ashritaha Vidya Rupa Tataivoma Vishnu Stanam Upashrita Shringad Radya Kriti Gata Kriyatma Paka Seshanaha Angeshu Kratava Sarve Madhya Deha Cha Dharmarat Prano Vayus Chitogato Brahmadya Sveshu Devataha. The various demigods are all acting under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and according to their various activities, the demigods are differently named. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Garim Yad Kripa Taraham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. So, Srila Prabhupada mentions here in the purport about atheists, and their logic is that since they can't see God, therefore God doesn't exist. Somehow or another they put a lot of emphasis on their ability to see. And sometimes when Srila Prabhupada was lecturing, somebody would ask him a challenging question. Can you show me God? And Srila Prabhupada would reply that with another question, what is your power to see God? They are so bold to say, God, show me God. But Prabhupada would explain that if I turn out the lights and you're in darkness, you can't see your hand in front of your face. So what is your power to see God? And generally speaking, a person who wants to control the conversation tries to do it by asking questions. Who's ever asking the questions is controlling the conversation. So this person thought, or many times, not just one, but so many thought that because Srila Prabhupada was speaking about God, which is something that you can't, it's not concrete, they feel. It's abstract. So therefore we'll ask this question and kind of try to stump the Swami. Right? But Srila Prabhupada, being very expert and also convinced about the subject matter, there was no doubt in his mind who God was. And yes, Srila Prabhupada would say sometimes, I can show you God, but what's your qualification to see God? So, in this particular verse, Prabhupada mentions that for them, the persons that place so much emphasis on their pratyaksha, direct experience through the senses, well, here's a way you can see my impersonal feature, the way you can understand it. Yes, God has his different aspects, right? Just like any big person, they have their different aspects. The president of a country, he has his different aspects also. He has his official status as the president of the country, and there's various protocols for dealing with him. One country politician who's on the same status with another country's politician. There's a protocol for how they greet each other and how they treat. That's an impersonal status, right? So God also has his impersonal concept, which is all pervading, undifferentiated, right? It's actually there. Bhagavad Gita talks about the impersonal aspect of the Supreme Lord, right? And here Vishnu has come to Daksha, who has offered these nice Hamsakuya prayers, and he's explaining to him, right, how one can understand his impersonal feature. The Lord also has his localized aspect, and he also has his personal feature. Although the president of the country, he's officially has some status, but he also has his personal life, right? He has his personal interaction with his family, with his wife, and with his children, and that's a much more intimate understanding of this person. So God is the same. He has his intimate relationships with his devotees, and he interacts with them in a very personal way. So the idea that the God is something impersonal, or that God doesn't exist because I can't experience him with my senses, these are all false. They're not complete. Only understanding God's impersonal aspect is incomplete because he also has this personal feature. God likes to interact with his devotees. Srila Prabhupada tells a story. I forget whether he was going to meet some government official long before he took sannyas. Still he was the householder. And he was waiting a long time to meet this person. It was a British officer, right? So he wasn't coming out to invite him into his office. So Srila Prabhupada just kind of looked in to see, and there was this British officer, big man, the British Raj, and he was acting as a horse, allowing his grandson to ride on his back, right? So he was engaged in playing with his grandson in this way, right? So God, similarly, he engages with his devotees, right? Out of affection. He has his official status as being prevalent and all-pervading in every space. That's one aspect of God. But he also has this very personal aspect, too, of interacting with his devotees. We see Krishna in Krishna's pastimes when he interacts with his devotees in a very personal way. He plays with the cowherd boys, and out of great devotion, they play various games. And the cowherd boys, they are sometimes victorious in the games, and sometimes they lose the games. Krishna also, sometimes he's a winner, sometimes he's a loser. And as a loser, they have to carry the winners on their backs, right? Piggyback, they call it. Right? So sometimes Krishna is also carrying the cowherd boy on his back. Right? This is a loving relationship that Krishna has with his devotees in the spiritual world. So for the devotee of the Lord, this impersonal aspect, they consider it like a hellish situation, right? Because in the impersonal aspect, there's non-differentiation. Srila Prabhupada explains it as like spiritual suicide. If everything's one, if it's all one, there's no differentiation between the knower and the known, between the beloved, right? It's just like being in a dark room and a black cat walks in the dark room. Since there's no light to differentiate things, you won't even know that the black cat is in the room. So the Brahmajyoti is something like that. It's undifferentiated Brahman. So in such a situation, the living entity doesn't differentiate with anything else. But in the spiritual world, which is actually the source of Brahman, Krishna is the source of everything. He's also the source of Brahman, and he's also the source of the spiritual world. There's variegatedness. There's different mellows to relish in relationship with Krishna. So for the devotee of the Lord, their effort is to attain those mellows, to attain the abode of the Lord, to interact with the Lord in one of those loving relationships. And for that, the chief method, as Srila Prabhupada mentions here about chanting Hare Krishna, is chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. The obstacle for the living entity in this material world that blocks his understanding of his eternal relationship with Krishna is the covered over consciousness, covered over with the idea that I can enjoy in this material world, that somehow or another I can manipulate the energy, the material energy, in such a way that I will enjoy. So the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is so powerful that it clears away this false concept, this false understanding. It, as Cheto Dharpana Marjam, the consciousness is like a mirror. It reflects what's before it. But if this mirror is covered by dust, in other words, if the consciousness is covered by this idea that I can enjoy in this material world, or that I can be an owner of objects in this material world, then that relationship with Krishna can't develop. So the holy name, it clears away all of this, it cleanses the heart of this concept that, I'm the owner and that I'm the enjoyer. And not only that, which is like the beginning stages of devotion, to give up this idea that I'm separate from Krishna and that I'm in competition with Krishna, to try to be an enjoyer. That's the beginning. But the holy name, this first part, Chetodharpana Marjanam, of the Shikshastakam, also, it also means that the holy name will take us all the way up to understanding what our Sarup is with Krishna in the spiritual world, and whatever that happens to be. So, that first statement in Shikshastakam about the holy name, it's the very beginning, and it's the highest thing also. And the holy name also protects us from the material nature. There's so much contamination by the three modes of material nature: passion, ignorance, right? They just can overwhelm the living entity so quickly within a moment, right? Sometimes a despicable act is committed, and the living entity thinks, how did I ever do that, right? It's because the living entity is overwhelmed by the modes of passion and ignorance. Right? So the holy name serves to protect the living entity from this, the contaminations of the material world. Right? And the holy name, its power is such that it creates a very auspicious atmosphere for the living entity, right? There's so many inauspicious things in the material world. Everything outside of Krishna is inauspicious, right? And the living entity becomes confused about what is auspicious and what is inauspicious, what is to be done and what is not to be done. But the holy name is so powerful that it keeps the living entity always on track, right? He becomes guided properly by the Supreme Lord who's residing within his heart. And for one who's chanting the holy name, endeavoring to chant the holy name purely, or who's chanting the holy name purely, the Lord inspires them from within the heart about how to perform devotional service. They're never without knowledge and doing and saying things appropriately. So, the holy name is all auspicious, and it's our great gift from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Just think about where we would be if Srila Prabhupada hadn't explained to us and given us the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, right? It's like being lost out at sea without a ship without a rudder, just being tossed around by the different passions and ignorance and different associations that we would come into. So Srila Prabhupada has given us the holy name. He's also given us the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the power of the Srimad Bhagavatam is so great. When we read about the glories of the Bhagavatam and what the various acharyas have said about the importance of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says if all the other books in the world were destroyed, but Srimad Bhagavatam remained, there'd be no loss of knowledge. Everything is there in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's so powerful. It can purify anyone. Even the hard-hearted Kali Yuga living entities can become, their hearts can become softened by regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So powerful. There's something I read recently in an old issue of the Kantamrita by Madhavananda. Interesting thing. There's a saying in Orissa, Shanda Bhagavat Sunuchi. So Oriya, I don't know Oriya, but this one phrase meant that it's like reciting Bhagavatam to a bull, which means, you know, the bull's just an animal, so doing some useless thing, like reciting Bhagavatam to a bull. Right? So it's kind of a phrase in Orissa. But there's this interesting story that in Orissa, in the old, in Bhubaneswar, the old town of Bhubaneswar, there's a Lord Shiva temple there, and known as Kapileshwar. So the devotees had organized a Bhagavat Katha, and the Bhagavat Katha was going to go on for 7 days, right? So on the very first day of the Bhagavat Katha, one huge bull came in and sat down. So they tried to chase him off, but a bull's a bull. He was a huge, guy. And he was sitting there, and he refused, even though the devotees tried to shoo him off, he just tolerated their, efforts and sat right there. So he listened to the whole katha, the bull, and sure enough, the next day, right on time, just before the Bhagavat Katha started, the bull came again and sat down. So he did that for the full 7 days, right? So next year, the annual program of the Bhagavat Katha started again, and a few people were kind of wondering if the bull might show up. And sure enough, day number 1, right on time, he was there. And again, for the full 7 days, he listened to the katha. So then the third year came, right? And sure enough, the bull came very first day, on time, sat down, listened to the whole katha for 3 years in a row. Right? So even for animals, this Bhagavad Gita can have its potency. What to speak of the human beings that regularly hear Srimad Bhagavatam? They can reach the highest goal of this human form of life, which would be to return home back to Godhead, back to the spiritual world. Daksha, he attained perfection by chanting these nice prayers, following his good example. We can also obtain the highest perfection by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is also a prayer to Krishna, imploring Krishna to please engage us in his service so that we can learn how to become expert at devotional service. Devotional service is a cultivation. Gradually we learn how to do devotional service and we become very expert at devotional service, right? So that we can obtain our position in the spiritual world, whatever that might be. We can't speculate about it. But when the time is right, Bhakti Devi, the personification of devotional service, will enlighten us so that we can enter into the spiritual world and engage with Krishna and the things that he likes to do, which is take care of cows and dance with the gopis and different activities. I was out the other day at the Goshala, and the Gurukul kids were milking the cows and picking up the gobar, and I was just imagining that, well, you know, Krishna lives in a village and they have a lot of cows. I think that Nanda Maharaj had 9 lakh cows, right? 9 lakh? So that's a lot of cows. So Krishna also engaged in tying off the legs of the cows so that they could milk them. And I even think that it's explained that Krishna always has a rope on his side, a short, small rope for tying the cow's legs. So that means that Krishna is very much involved with this village life, right? Of being with cows and living in a village. So in Mayapur you have a unique opportunity to be with the cows and to engage in activities with the cows and kind of get trained up for going back home, back to the spiritual world. You know, nowadays not so, yeah, even nowadays in the big cities, people would come to the villages, from the villages and work in the cities in India. And they would have big colonies of small rooms where people would be living and working in factories. And whenever they got a vacation, they would go back to the village, right? Because really everyone was, in India, is a gaonwala. It means that they come from the village, right? There's very few, 80% of the population of India lives in the villages, even today. So everybody is from a village. And when they get an opportunity, where do? They go back to the village. Right? So I used to explain to them that, you know, you want to go to your village because you know everybody there and it's nice, fresh air, and it's not so crowded. But that village is not our real village. We're all gaonwalas, that's right. But the real village is in Vrindavan. It's in the spiritual world. So we're trying to get back there, back to our village with our gaonwalas, and this process of devotional service is the way to get there. Hare Krishna. So are there any questions, comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi.